I'm recording. All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to ABA Inside Track, the podcast that's like reading in your car, but safer. I'm your host, Robert Perry Cruz, and with me, as always, are my fabulous co hosts.
Hey Rob, it's me, Diana, Perry Cruz. Hello.
And it's me, Jackie. Happy day.
I like your new catchphrase then. Hello.
Oh,
Hello. Check, please.
Diana's like that guy on like the old timey thing when he's like, I'm too old for this. And then he says
yeah,
this swear word.
Your
yeah,
Lethal Weapon? Danny
yeah.
Glover from Lethal Weapon.
Yep.
This is the reference.
He was only 40.
I know, it's really sad. It's like, I'm 38. How am I going to handle keeping up with Mel Gibson?
Who was older, right?
I'm not sure.
I don't. I think Danny Glover is older than Mel Gibson, but I don't know if it's like a huge age gap.
That's like a Brad Pitt or lasers.
Yeah. Oh, but
Exactly.
this is not a
That's my
podcast
other
about
new catchphrase.
celebrity age. Exactly. Or Diana's horrible new catchphrases. This is a podcast about behavior analysis and behavior analytic research, where every week we pick a topic and then discuss relevant research articles for that topic. And this week we're doing something a little bit different. It's still about a topic and it's still using a discussion of articles. But one of the things that we really wanted to do is because we've done a lot of talks on collaboration at some conferences. We talked about ethics of collaboration, which is our topic today, ethics and collaboration thereof. However, rather than just
The
sort of
collaboration
releasing the recording
thereof.
of those talks, since we've done the talk a number of times, we've done a number of iterations on it, we thought let's just take the articles that are sort of our biggest ones that we spend the most time sort of citing and discussing, and let's just, kind of skid into an episode. However, since we do have the slides from some of the talks we've done, we sort of smushed together a couple of the different talks we've done into one kind of PowerPoint mega slides. We thought let's also try doing a video with those visuals available while we do our kind of our normal episode discussion. So if you're listening to this on your podcast player, you can go to YouTube. We'll also probably just link the slides somewhere as well. You can go to YouTube and watch us talking over the slides as sort of a background. We're not going to go over the slides like we would in a conference necessarily, but they'll be there as some visuals. If you just want to listen to us talk about it, that's fine. You're going to get all the information you need. But if you want to see a little bit of some extra presentation work that we've done in the past and we thought would be relevant, great. You can go to YouTube, or we'll have a link to some of the slides for you to check out. So we'll see how this goes. I already said I don't want to do a lot of video editing, so get ready for some jump cuts or who knows what. This is not meant to be a blooper reel though, so we'll see how it all works out.
Keeping it tight.
Keeping it tight. That's right. So we're going to be talking about the ethics of collaboration, and while we will be citing some other articles, sort of like mini discussion points, we did have a couple that we mentioned in the preview that were sort of our key articles that we are going to be talking about. So, Diana, what are the articles that we are of most interest in when we talk about the ethics of collaboration?
Yeah, there are several articles that we will reference here in this talk, but I pulled out a few that we haven't referenced in other episodes, and that way they kind of get billing here. But again, we've like pulled from a lot of different things to put this together. But if you're interested in going to check out some background reading, you could look at these. Standards for Interprofessional Collaboration in the Treatment of Individuals with Autism by Bowman, Suarez, and Weiss. That was in Behavior Analysis and Practice 2021. Collaboration between behavior analysts and occupational therapists in autism service provision, Bridging the Gap by Gasiewski, Weiss, Leaf, and Labowitz. And that was in Behavior Analysis and Practice 2021. Promoting Ethical Discussions and Decision-Making in a Human Service Agency by LeBlanc, Onofrio, Valentino, and Sleeper. And that was in Behavior Analysis and Practice 2020. And then finally, Maintaining Professional Relationships in an Interdisciplinary Setting, Strategies for Navigating Non-Behavioral Treatment Recommendations for Individuals with Autism. That was by Brodhead, Behavior Analysis and Practice 2015.
And we did talk about that one
I
way
know,
back
but
when.
I know I have like the flowchart from that in my slide, so I wanted to
Yes.
make sure I gave credit at the beginning here.
That was back in episode, I want to say 26.
Yeah,
How to talk
good
to
job. Wow,
non-behavior
usually that's my
analysts.
specialty.
That I think that is the episode where we really like the show sort of really gel. Like that was a firing on all cylinders. Okay, we know what this show is. We know
All
how to
right.
do a podcast a long time ago. Almost
I want to
300
tell
episodes.
everyone
Oh
what
boy.
our learning goals are because I have to go in 1 minute.
And then return.
Then I'll come back, but I just had to
We
exit for
really
one
planned this
minute.
one.
Yeah. So guess what? We're gonna tell you guys what you're gonna learn about. This is good. This is good addition. So we have three goals for you. They include the participants, meaning listeners, will define collaboration as it relates to the workplace. They're going to list ethical codes that pertain to collaboration from the BACB list, and then participants will describe advantages of collaboration and examples. Not disadvantages, though. This is positive.
Mm.
We're taking a positive spin here on collaboration. So get ready.
Get ready. So when we've done this as a talk, I have like a big song and dance, and I do like a really big show to pull everyone in as storytelling. But since this isn't meant to be a talk, this is meant to be a podcast episode, I'm sort of just going to tone it down a little bit and just share kind of the story piece and sort of where we came from with some of this. And I got the two monitors because Diana's got to go check something real fast. Okay, Diana's stuck.
So hot in here.
All right. So, one of the reasons that we like to talk about the ethics of collaboration is because, as we will talk about many times within these articles, that is not necessarily something we were ever trained to do. When you are learning to be a BCBA, you are learning to be a behavior analyst, meaning you are learning the science of human behavior. You are learning the relevant research articles related to the topics on the task list that you will need to know. You're learning about ethics. And I think the take home for a lot of newly minted BCBAs is behavior analytic uh, treatment to be ethical has to have a very tight evidence based within the scope of the study of human behavior. That doesn't always take into account that there are many, many other fields that, while they are not behavior analytic fields, also do have a relevant ethical research base. Though one of the challenges you will run into is just because a treatment might have an evidence base, it might not be the evidence base you're used to looking up. It might also not have an evidence base that is exactly the same as yours, so there might be a little bit more room for research that has fewer citations or that is looking at a behavior from a more skill acquisition lens rather than like a general human behavior lens. We saw this a lot like for Jackie, Diana, and I when we were sort of coming up and we were new BCBAs. There were a lot of occupational therapy techniques related to things like weighted vests, right? Weighted vests are going to be the best thing. Weighted vests are important for our autistic clients. There was not a lot of research. And even if you look at the research that there is for occupational therapists, if you look at some of the position papers of the occupational therapy groups, they very clearly pointed out like there is not enough research for this to be evidence-based. We need to stop just throwing this out as a recommendation as a field. So, but we're not always in tune with how is field A talking about some of these big hot issues. The same way that when we're talking about things like is the ISCA an appropriate replacement for, an analog functional analysis, nobody outside of behavior analysis cares at all, right? So they're not going to really see that as an ethical quandary. If a behavior analyst says I'm doing an ISCA or I'm doing an FA, most people will shrug and be like, yeah, that makes sense. You know what you're doing. That's human behavior, right? So one of the big challenges we run into is we don't have enough opportunities to collaborate when we're learning about behavior analysis, so that when we're faced with opportunities to collaborate, what we often see are things that on their face look wrong or bad and can lead us to make pretty broad statements about a lack of evidence base, a lack of research. This isn't behavior analytic. Ergo, for me to be ethical, I have to tell you to go pound sand. Your treatment sucks. Now, sometimes there are situations where that might not be that far off from the way you need to be advocating for your client to be ethical. We'll talk about the differentiation. But when you're just learning the ropes, most behavior analysts, and I'm going to say most from the perspective of behavior analysts I worked with when I was going through the exact same learning process myself, do one of two things. One is stand up like Gregory Peck in To Kill a Mockingbird and tell everyone how very wrong they are. If you're fortunate like me to be someone who loves talking about things fancifully, sometimes that at least comes off as this guy kind of knows what he's talking about and he's very loud and passionate. So I guess we shouldn't get mad. We'll just sort of turn our heads and ignore him and it won't, get him fired. But for a lot of people, it might not come off as at least somewhat genteel complaining and demagoguery. And you could get in real trouble and be told, like, nobody wants you around, get out of here. So that's one pathway, is be a jerk. Pathway two is to be permissive. I don't want to rock the boat. I don't know enough about this. I don't want to lose my job. I don't think this is right, but I also don't know how to say that without saying you're wrong, and I don't want that conflict. So I will sort of just through omission, just sort of let these things happen. The problem with both options is you're left with someone either not necessarily learning the important lesson of collaboration from being a jerk, let's say. And I say when being a jerk, I'll be speaking about some of my own behavior in the past, just being loud and obnoxious about how this isn't evidence-based, even if you are 100% right, doesn't actually teach you how to shape your collaborative problem solving because usually you are excluded from those situations. People don't want to work with you, so you don't learn how to work with them. And many of us humans, when faced with situations where we know that to some extent we are kind of right and everyone is being mean, as Principal Skinner once said on The Simpsons, are we so out of touch? No, it's the children who are wrong, right? We blame everybody else. It's their fault. They're not good scientists. They don't understand human behavior. I shouldn't have to work with these clowns. And we get a very...
And us saying like, oh, something's not evidence-based, right? To us, it's like, oh, that's the death knell of an idea, right? Like, well, it's not evidence-based. Well, then we should immediately throw it away. But not everyone kind of has that same value system that is placing like, scientifically determined facts at the highest level. There are other ways to make appeals that might be more meaningful to someone else that related to their value system.
Exactly. We also don't know the research some of the fields look at, so what counts as evidence-based might be slightly different than ours, and not as necessarily less rigorous. Some fields I would say yes. But again, a lot of fields I think are very rigorous, but just slightly different ways than we are. And if we don't know that, great. And if you're mean and nobody wants to work with you, you don't really learn that. When you are permissive, the other issue you run into is people just steamroll over you. You're just sort of stuck in a situation where when people say things, you go along to get along. But the challenge there is you're also not learning how to stand up for evidence-based treatments. Everything becomes an evidence-based treatment simply by dint of, I don't want to complain or cause a problem. And I think that leads a lot of behavior analysts who are working in fields that are not just BCBAs all day, really run into the challenge of don't know how to have these tough conversations. A lot of us don't know how to have tough conversations. So again, we run into the challenge of we either don't collaborate because we don't think we should have to and everyone else is wrong, or we don't collaborate because we're not really sure the best way to go about it, and then we just end up sort of rubber stamping a lot of treatments that are not evidence-based. Neither of these would be considered ethical behavior. And I think when you're starting out in a field, you get a little bit of leeway of you are being an unethical behavior analyst. But at the end of the day, both options are not ethical behavior because they're not leading to better outcomes for your clients. Luckily,
yeah, and can I just add one thing there too is I think we also have to be humble in these conversations about collaboration and not have it sound like, oh, whatever our secret agenda is always going to be the best for the client, right? Because what you're saying is, oh, well, maybe we, steamroll everyone and don't make friends, but our treatment gets through, right? Or we, are milquetoast about the whole thing and the best treatment doesn't get through. But there's a third option there, which is that by not engaging in collaboration, we don't actually find the best treatment option for our client because it could be a mix of things that we might be recommending and another field is recommending, and that's really what's going to serve our client best. So that's a third way in which not engaging in collaboration could be detrimental.
So again, we don't want to look like this guy. We want to look like somebody.
You have to explain for anyone listening.
If you have never seen the mid-70s movie Network, the famous scene is the news reporter who is going to kill himself on air, and he gets in, and the famous quote, "I'm mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore." Which, again, I think if you watch that movie with the wrong mindset, you think, this guy's a real hero. This guy's supposed to be crazy. You're not supposed to get up. And Network as a movie is probably not as trenchant as it was in the 70s because all you're going to watch when you watch Network now, it's like, yeah, that's what TV is. People get on the air and scream and yell and they don't come up with any solutions and they're real big jerks and everybody loves it because that's what most media is today, folks. Hot takes, hot takes. There you go. That's what you get from us. I think media is no one's doing journalistic work anymore. Y'all, and everyone loves it. I don't know why. It's gross. And this is someone who used to love being this guy in meetings. I'm telling you, don't do this. So I hope it carries a little weight there. But in any case, nobody
He's
wants
just
to
a
look like
great
this.
acting in this scene, though.
Oh yeah, this is a great film. I think if you
I'm
can watch it with the right
bashful and I'm not gonna take it anymore. That's how the
context.
quote goes.
Yeah, if you can watch it in the right context, Network's still I think relevant and interesting movie. But in any case, you don't want to look like the person who thinks I'm saying something important loudly and waving my hands. Ergo, you should be listening to me. That's not meaningful collaboration. So what is collaboration? Let's talk about it.
Oh, now it's my turn. So collaboration is, for one thing, not just waiting for your turn to talk, right? So I've been adding in my little bits here, and I think that that's a good approach to kind of start things off.
Wait, so what you were doing when you said I'd like to add something was not collaboration?
That was just, tramping over your speech. No, it was just a joke because, we're like taking turns with our talks here. Um, Collaboration can kind of be defined in different ways, so I don't want to always make it sound like the same thing. At the core of it, of course, it involves people coming together from different backgrounds or disciplines and working to create the best solution possible for the client or whomever is at the center of the collaborative process. But the way that this could look could be a little bit different depending on the players involved, the roles that they have, and kind of how they're tied together to the client. So we don't want to make it sound like it's always going to be the same and you're always going to have the same role in your collaborations because sometimes you might be more tied into the case, right? You might be like as the BCBA like the main, clinician involved and you're bringing in others in more of a consultative capacity, right? At other times, it may be that you are coming in as more of the consultative role, and maybe the general ed teacher in the classroom, for example, might be kind of the main clinician or person in charge there. Or it might be a case where, you don't see these folks except during the IEP, and that's the only time that there is collaboration. So every one of those situations might kind of have a little bit of a different spin or a different flavor on it. So it's not always going to be the same, but the core idea here is that we are engaging in shared decision making together with always the best interest of the client in mind, what we all think of as the best interest of the client and how that's going to be implemented and what those outcomes might look like. Everyone could kind of have varying opinions on that, and that's part of the collaboration process is getting to the core of what does it mean for this client to have the best possible outcome. And that's where the piece comes in that is probably the key to all of this is figuring out what the shared values are around the table, right? So coming from the perspective of what is the most important piece of this for our client, and this kind of relates back to person-centered planning, quality of life goals, etc. And having everyone identify at the base level that what we want to do here is what is best for our client, right? That's from Cox 2012, if you're looking for a reference there. So discovering what the shared values of everyone at the table is, which usually is best interest, right? Not grandstanding or whatever Atticus Finch was doing in his
He wasn't grand. He was being a great lawyer. He looked very, he
he
was
was
making great
lawyering.
points.
Okay, fine. Um,
Jackie, did he win an Academy Award for that movie? You would
Yes.
know. Did he really?
I have no idea.
I gotta look that up real quick. Keep going,
I'm not
sorry.
I'm not even sure I watched that movie. So
To Kill a Mockingbird?
I read the book, but I'm not sure I watched the movie.
Okay. So a common theme that we see across research on consultation is that the collaborative approach is going to involve the shared decision making between professionals that leads to the improved consumer outcome.
Yes, he did.
What?
Gregory Peck.
What?
He won an Oscar for To Kill a Mockingbird.
Oh, good. I mean,
You.
yeah. Okay.
So what you come here, folks? Come
Sorry,
here
I
for
don't know what else I was gonna say.
Oscar predictions from 50 years ago.
All right. And so then if we think about our common role in this whole process as a behavioral consultant, let's say we are definitely involved in that shared decision making and problem solving that can come with collaboration. So the pieces of that maybe wouldn't be shocking or anything because they're kind of how we approach problem solving in any capacity. We're going to enter into the collaborative relationship and identify if there are problems present, analyze what those problems are. So maybe people are coming at things from different angles or kind of have different foci in regard to how to best help the client. We're going to then look at what's the appropriate treatment to implement and evaluate how we're doing with that treatment. And so that kind of works on two levels, right? Like it could be entirely client focused or consumer focused in terms of how we're going to work together and collaborate to help that client. But there could also be problem solving pieces that are part of the collaboration itself, right? So if you're saying, I think this would be an appropriate treatment for this client, but the other parties who come from different professional backgrounds don't see it that way, that's a problem solving situation in and of itself. And that may involve us being flexible on our part and thinking about how we're going to define what it is that we're trying to get at here. And it also may involve flexibility on the other person's part, where we come in and say, actually, I do know something that might really work here, and this might not be part of your background, but let me tell you about it, right? And so maybe together you're going to create something new that involves training for everybody or training for the paraprofessionals involved, and then we're going to evaluate that. So often that can be part of the consultative and collaborative process is that we all kind of need to end up in the same place. And how we get there is problem solving itself. I also love this from Bowman et al., which was one of the articles I referenced at the start. And they, in that article, talk about the different ways that a interdisciplinary team can come together. And again, I just like to highlight this because it does show that different collaborative teams can look differently and the roles within those teams can be different, but I thought this was helpful. So they identify whether each professional in the group is going to be acting with autonomy or they're going to be engaging in what they called cross-disciplinary interdependence within the collaborative group. So if everyone's kind of operating with autonomy, they give us some metaphors to use here. So they say that's kind of like a salad, right? And they call this a multidisciplinary salad. Everyone's kind of working on their own. They're not necessarily talking a lot together, and they're really focused on their own task that fits within their own discipline. So a salad, like the pieces are touching one another, but they're not melded together in any way. You could still pick out like, here's the tomato, which is the SLP, and here's a piece of lettuce, and that's the OT, right? And here's a crouton, and that's the BCBA, right? Okay, so that's the level that has the most autonomy. And then an interdisciplinary group is one where the metaphor here is like a soup or a simile. It's a metaphor, I guess. And in this soup, the tasks are coordinated together. People are talking more. You're sharing your goals, like I talked about earlier. But you're still kind of like sticking in your own section. So a soup is the flavors are melding, right? There's conversation happening, but you could still pick out a chunk of carrot or celery or whatever it might be in your soup. And then finally, you have a transdisciplinary group, and that's really rising above all of these other types in terms of the interdependence of everybody's role in the group. So here, everyone's kind of like letting go of their own background. They are integrating together. They're engaging in shared problem solving and a unified treatment plan. I think that this is appropriate to some degree, but you also still have to operate within your scope of competence. So I'll just add that here. But the metaphor here is a cake because now the pieces, you can no longer pick out the individual ingredients. Everyone is working together in such a way that you've created something new, and it only is resulting from that interdisciplinary experience.
I think for most folks, if you're working in, say, like a school system, would be a good example. I do see more of a move to try to build an interdisciplinary team, but I think based on time, based on demands, and frankly, based on the training that many of us professionals who've been in the field for a while have gotten, we usually end up with the multidisciplinary salad approach, which I think increasingly people are tired of. I find as someone who mostly works in the capacity as a consultant more than I do necessarily a direct service provider, I've been able to sort of support in my own ways, building more interdisciplinary or sometimes even transdisciplinary teams. And just professionally, I think for folks who are a little nervous about, I don't want to give up my autonomy as a behavior analyst, boy, there is nothing more educational than getting into interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary teams because it really stretches both your understanding of human behavior and your understanding of how treatments can be behavior analytic or not behavior analytic from other fields. I think
Mm.
of like our episode on something like collaborative problem solving. That would not have been something that we really talked or learned about without having more experiences in sort of interdisciplinary collaborative teams over our years as professionals. But it takes work. It's not something that like, well, if we just all get together, I'm sure it'll magically we make a cake. You have to be very specific about how you go about those steps. So we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the pieces that could lead to you're getting the choice of working with your team to pick which makes the most sense for your client.
Yeah, it's actually easy to screw up baking
Mhm.
because it involves chemistry.
Well, as someone who bakes all the time, I would totally know. Nope. That's because I'm scared my cake will poison people. So I stick to salads and soups.
All right. So just to, round out this conversation, when we think about collaboration, uh, best practice would be that where everyone is contributing together, that should promote overall student um, benefit, right? And well-being. If everyone's working together, which makes sense, right? Everyone should be talking to one another. And the way in which we're going to determine if these collaborative projects are effective is via kind of the way that we always should be looking at this, which is social validity, right? And with social validity, we're asking the client and any affected people on the treatment team, right? How this project is turning out. There's three main components of social validity, according to Wolf. The first one are the goals that were selected to be the academic goals, the behavior goals, the overall, intervention approach. Does everyone agree that those were good goals to start with? Number two, the way in which the team is approaching the education that's going to make changes to those goals, right? So what does your behavior plan look like? What does your treatment look like? How are you approaching, academic skills? Is everyone in agreement that they like the approach that's being done? So the process. And then piece number three is everyone on the team satisfied with the outcome? So you said you made changes. Are they changes that are really operating at a socially significant level for your client and the treatment team such that everyone is satisfied with how things turned out? So, we love data, right? Behavior analysts love data, and we can show people data all the time. But if everyone's not in agreement that the things that we're taking data on are good, the way that we're making changes is good, and that the overall outcome is good, then we really haven't done our job. So we're reliant on feedback from that entire collaborative team, as well as the client and their family, that this process is going well. So that's always going to be our final take on it, and we should not forget that. Kelly and Tincati, 2013, took a look at how much background behavior analysts get in collaboration. And they interviewed like 300 BCBAs and found that 62% of them engage in collaborative process as part of their jobs, but 67% of them did not have any focus on collaboration in graduate school. So that was, 10 years ago. Has it changed today? Maybe, maybe not. We are not necessarily sure. And
How much do you all teach on collaboration?
I do.
Actually, quite a bit.
Yeah,
Yeah, we do quite a bit, but
I figured as much. That's why I brought it up.
Yeah,
I was
I
not
actually,
trying to sandbag you with like, show me how you failed. No, I knew you guys did. We've had
we actually do a project with SLP students and then with OT students
Mhm.
where everyone has to work together to create like a mini IEP for a hypothetical case. So, okay, sorry. I thought Jackie was saying something.
Oh, and
I was yawning, sorry.
Okay. And then these authors ask the BCBAs how likely were they to provide collaboration to other professionals and or provide suggestions during collaboration to other professionals, and then how likely were they to adopt suggestions from other professionals. And uh, in every category except for other BCBAs, they reported that they were more likely to provide suggestions than adopt suggestions, only by a little bit,
That
but
tracks.
Mm.
still,
That
yes.
tracks.
And maybe this would be true across all fields. We don't necessarily have that information in front of us here, but it does tell us a little bit about the approach or attitude that BCBAs might be coming into this whole thing with, and one that we want to, again, make sure that we're approaching our collaborations with humility.
Mhm. And certainly being folks who tend to do more problem solving or leading problem solving, that's often a lot of the roles that people think of when they think of BCBAs. Like, I'm calling you in to tell us what we're supposed to do. And so, on the one hand, that often is our role and our job, and it's very exciting to have that job to sort of be leading the problem solving. However, I think what's often lacking, I think we all agree is something that's lacking, is if we haven't had opportunities to collaborate in the past, we really don't come off as more than, here I am, here's a bunch of ideas, go forth and
Rock
use
me
them,
like a hurricane.
or not, rather than coming in, actually getting a sense of what's going on, working with the team to develop solutions. Because if all you can do is come in and say, here are some great ideas, most likely those will not be adopted by folks. And you might not understand why they won't be adopted, other than, well, they just don't want to make a change, or they just don't like what I'm selling them because they're dumb or something. You're going to come up with some sort of fallacy to explain the situation. Now, one of the things that is odd about collaboration, and when we talk about sort of prerequisites to success in collaboration, you sort of have to understand that most professional settings really do value collaboration and have a lot more training in collaborative problem solving, in professional collaboration. It does have, we've talked about, a history of improving the outcomes of a lot of, client and treatment goal outcomes. This also is something that's considered important to caregivers, even within our field. If we go back to Taylor's big survey of parents, parents want their BCBAs to be talking with other people who work with their children. Meaning, if you're not collaborating, you're potentially blowing away some of the social validity components of the treatment program that the stakeholders would like to see. One other thing that we want to keep in mind is, as professionals, while we do want to be really keeping abreast of what's going on in the science of human behavior and in behavior analysis, that doesn't mean our learning has to stop only at behavior analysis. We've found, I think, doing this show, certainly, and working with so many great people across the years, is there are lots of awesome ideas out there, many of which could even have histories in behavior analysis. We've talked a lot about what was behavior analysis like in the 50s and the 60s, and it was not like behavior analysis in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and 2000s. There was a lot more reach, and there was a lot more opportunity for collaboration. Like we talked about, even like neuroscience collaboration with Murray Sidman back in
Yeah,
the 70s, right?
yeah, and I'm gonna talk about that in the next slide.
Mhm. So it's an important part of how we can learn and grow our knowledge. I even mentioned collaborative problem solving as another example of something that I think we all thought was a really, interesting addition to some of the kind of possible updates to behavior plans, and felt that it did have a basis in human behavior. However, if we weren't willing to collaborate or listen to other ideas, well, that's a psychology thing. We don't do that. We don't do that in behavior analysis, right? And it's also a really great way for us to disseminate our own practice. I had a conversation the other day where I pretty much was told by somebody that we were talking about mental health, and therefore I had nothing to add to that and should stay in my behavior lane. And because I have worked with so many people in the past, and I have collaborated rather than just demagogued to many school psychologists, adjustment counselors, social workers, I had a good understanding of exactly what we were talking about and was able to put it into human behavior and behavior analytic terminology, so that it was very clear that this was something I very much understood. And while might move slightly outside of my realm of competence, I knew who the people on our team would be to sort of take our treatment goals over the finish line. It didn't all have to be my plan. And I think it was very surprising for this person that I was able to talk about a topic. And if I had never collaborated, it really would have been like, well, that stuff's that stuff's mentalistic hoo-ha. That's mentalistic garbage, and I don't have to listen to it, and you're wrong. It really would have been a very different conversation and come up with a very different treatment plan, possibly one that didn't include me. So you have to collaborate. And if you're not interested in collaboration, A, that's not going to be lead to ethical behavior, and B, you're shutting yourself off to learning. So Jackie, like you mentioned, we have a long historical context that's often papered over. Yeah. So let's go into it a little more detail then.
Yeah, so I think it's important to remember where we as behavior analysts came from, because it might do us a good thing to think about where we came from and how we can get back to where we came from, right? Because we've moved pretty far away from where we've started. So historically, behavior
And
analysts
hysterically. No, just kidding.
and hysterically, I have to let my dog outside.
Behavior analyst, what are you doing? Come on, we got to collaborate.
Historically, yeah, behavior analysts really weren't called behavior analysts, and they worked as a partner on a team, right, in hospitals. And they worked with other professionals to make the lives of those individuals that were institutionalized a little bit better, right? Steve Wolf and Kasdan both described instances in the literature where groups of professionals sat together and discussed the way to treat what was conceptualized then as problematic behavior, and other professionals had maybe given up on these individuals were behavior analysts who weren't called behavior analysts then, but what we would categorize as behavior analysis now, really, thought we could make a difference. But somewhere along the way, when we started getting more, notoriety in mainstream, even though we're not full mainstream, right? And somewhere around the way from the early 70s to the present day, we really kind of, I think, lost our collaborative way. And I'm hoping we're getting back to that, right? So in my graduate school experience, I never learned anything about collaboration. And that wasn't something that we talked about, and it wasn't a focus because I think the focus in graduate school education back then, way back then, really was to learn terminology and the principles of behavior analysis and not necessarily how to work well with others. And so I think it would be really nice if we could get back to that, because I think in many ways we have kind of siloed ourselves into this tiny hole where we might not talk to other professionals even though we work really closely with them. And there really is a lot of reasons why this may be the case. The separation effect probably could be due to how we view the world and how we, examine and look at behavior. Right? Behavior analysts have a different worldview and different principles than that of their work counterparts, such as OT and SLP. And even though we have the same or very similar end products, how we talk about how we get there may be different. And that may really be challenging for behavior analysts and OT and SLPs, right? It's kind of challenging for everyone to find that common ground and make collaboration more challenging, especially if we've not had any experience collaborating, or if we don't know that others have a different worldview than us, or acknowledge that others have a different worldview than us, it might be more challenging for us to get on board. Another reason why behavior analysts may not collaborate or may be hesitant to collaborate with others is that we don't understand what other professionals do and how our fields can interact, right? So we don't get a good training in, what is the basic founding principles of speech and language pathology? What are the basic founding principles of OT? Like, what do they want to do? And we don't necessarily know everything about what they do. So for instance, up until not very recently, but like in my early behavior analytic days, I did not know that speech and language pathologists also worked on feeding and swallowing. And so if I did not know that, and I had a student that was having trouble eating food, I might not know to go and ask a speech and language pathologist because they're trained in doing it. And then I might sadly work outside of my scope of competence or competence and confidence, to be honest.
Well, you can have confidence without competence, sadly.
That's true.
One can.
Right. And I might I might, do the client a disservice where if I would have collaborated with an SLP, it would have been better, right?
Or an
Also,
OT, actually.
or OT, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so speaking of that, behavior analysts and other fields also have different ethical codes that we have to follow. So this might result in tensions on what others can do ethically and then what behavior analysts can do ethically, right? And one of the hot topic is accepting gifts, right? So teachers can accept greater amount of gifts than behavior analysts can. So we can accept $10 or less now, before it was nothing.
Yeah.
Right. And so when we make that declaration, right, before like any holiday or when we're going to be working with a client, like we can't accept these sorts of gifts, that might be perceived differently because others may be working under a different ethical code, right? And then if you think about these outside sources and outside factors that may be a barrier for collaboration, and some of those might be funding sources, such as insurances may not pay for collaboration across disciplines. Although I have seen some insurances now start to pay for those meetings, those interdisciplinary meetings, which is
Oh.
good. I mean, it's getting there. But in the past, when I had worked with insurance companies, some insurance companies will only pay for one of the two parties to meet, right? And so that actually leaves the other party out on missed payments and missed time. So this
Yeah.
imbalance really doesn't promote a workplace that values collaboration. And I know that you work in public school, Rob, and in many of the public schools that I have consulted with recently on IEPs, the IEP is not what we usually would call a transdisciplinary document, right? It's like
It's
the
very, yeah,
teacher,
it's very team specific as to
right? The
whether
teachers
it
are
is
going
or
to
not.
talk about their teacher goals. The SLPs are going to talk about their SLP goals. The OT are going to talk about their OT goals. And so that really isn't promoting this collaboration. And sometimes I see that it's really good. There have been some places where people are like sharing goals and working together. But I don't know if that is the norm. And so I think when we
It's
talk,
it
what?
it it turns less about sort of like what is the professional means of collaboration, and it really does come down to personality. So, for example, is this a teacher who is very much of the mindset, my classroom and everything that happens in my students' lives is under my purview, so I'm going to make collaboration happen. And in those cases, it's a lot easier because if the person who sort of has to implement a lot or work with everybody is like, no, I'm in charge, you're sort of like, okay, let's go with it. We'll end up collaborating from that. But if you're doing it from professional to the people who will then have to implement some of the suggestions, it doesn't become collaboration, even though it might sound the same. One person standing up for this is important for us to work together. But if you're just some outside provider or an outside consultant doing that, that's not collaboration. That's again, that goes back to sort of are you demagoguing about a principle?
Right. Cool. We can move on. And so now, the talk is called the ethics of collaboration because ethically, it's actually important to engage in collaboration. Collaboration aligns us at the very core of our ethical code. So in 2020, we got a new ethical code, and I keep calling it the new code, but now it's 5 years old, so it's like a toddler. It's almost
I
into its
know.
like, elementary age years, so it's no longer the new code. But what I love about the updated code is that it starts off talking about the four main principles by which all behavior analysts should strive to professionally live by. And those include benefiting others, treating others with compassion, dignity, and respect, behaving with integrity, and ensuring competence. And these principles give behavior analysts another layer to help us in interpreting how we can follow the code in a way that's going to be beneficial for our clients and ourselves, and not just, this very concrete, yes, you can do it, no, you cannot, right? So you really need to be looking at the layers of your situations. And so we can benefit others by effectively and respectfully collaborating with other professionals in the best interest of those with whom we work. and always placing those clients' interests and needs first. So let's say a speech and language pathologist really wants to implement this specific treatment that they have found data on. We don't really know a lot about it. We're unsure, but we've done our research and we see that it's probably not going to be harmful. So we can work with them and take data to ensure that, we're not going to be like, no, I haven't found a research in Java to support this, so we're not doing it. And this is one way that we can collaborate in the best interest of the child or client. And collaborating with others outside of our field allows us to really create a comprehensive treatment that that places our clients at the forefront and not our own, biases and our need to be right all the time. We can treat others with compassion, dignity, and respect by listening to their values and working with them instead of against them. And working with other professionals allows us to promote the self-determination of the individual across really all domains of their life. So we can act with integrity as a field when we discuss our ethical code with other fields in a compassionate way and to learn about their ethical codes as well, so that then we know, oh, I know you can't do this because it's under your ethical code. I mean, you don't have to like know it. Like we know our ethical code, right? You don't have to keep a copy in your back pocket, but you should also at least be aware of what the ethical codes of other fields you're working with. And then finally, we can really ensure we are working within our scope of competence by engaging in behavior analytic activities where appropriate, and knowing that we're not the experts in everything, and that's going to be hard for some of us, and to ask across fields when it's appropriate, and, to give up some of our, I guess, ownership. You know how sometimes we like take, this is my client, ownership
Right, yeah.
of the client, when it's going to be in their best interest. Okay, so here are the ethical standards that I kept coming back to when I was thinking about collaboration, that we should be considering, right? So the first two standards, 1.04, practicing with a defined role, and 1.05, practicing within our scope of competence, go hand in hand with what we as behavior analysts can and should do versus what we should not do, right? There's some programming outside of our scope of competence that if we engaged in, that behavior may be unethical and may actually harm our client, right? So with that example of the feeding, we may have experience in working with selected feeding, but we shouldn't even attempt to treat swallowing or chewing. And in those instances, we should really be practicing within our defined role, saying, hey, I can expand the repertoire of this student's selective eating, but if they are having trouble swallowing, this is a time where I might want to reach out and ask somebody else to help me help the student, right? And so another instance, we may actually really benefit from working with occupational therapy students and professionals on activities of daily living, because this is where we kind of, one of our like common specialties, where we work on activities of daily living and they work on activities of daily living, and working together, we might be able to find a really comprehensive treatment that allows our students or our clients to be able to learn skills faster. So the next standard that really allows us to engage in collaboration is standard 1.10, awareness of personal biases and challenges. And this one really spoke to me in a way that we should be aware of our personal biases toward other professionals, right? And what challenges we may already bring to the table when we are working with SLPs and OTs and counseling services, right? And anyone that we might be working with, and understanding what those are, so that we can, more openly have a good discussion. I have heard some BCBAs say that they don't want to work with people that engage in the field of therapeutic recreation because it's not science-based in the same way that our field is science-based. Right. And so this may lead to a bias in treatment and an inability to collaborate with those others, which is then going to be in a direct violation of standard 2.01, which is providing effective treatment, and 2.10, which is collaborating with colleagues. So we really have a responsibility to our clients to lay our personal biases aside and look at the specific client, what the needs of those clients are, and how other fields may help us get there. And then if we do that, we've actually aligned with 3.01, standard 3.01 responsibility to our client, because we are helping them to get the best outcome with everyone that's working them and to provide the best practice. So it's our job to translate other fields' practices with the lens of behavior analysis to find common ground and promote that collaboration. So if, for instance, a therapeutic recreation specialist says, hey, I want you to do X, I can say, okay, how you said that doesn't sound like I love it, but I'm going to think about how I can translate that into a way that I understand so that we can collaborate together.
Okay.
Right. And usually our jargon is much more specific and
Yeah.
nuanced than other fields, which is why I'm not saying they also have to do that. And maybe they should, but it's going to be a lot harder for them because we're so technical in our language that they would have to like go to school to talk behavior analytically. And so
Yeah. And there's a lot of gatekeeping that goes on with that if we're expecting people to talk in our, technical language.
Right.
And usually it's not necessary.
Right. So I think I think that is one way that I like to stretch my behavior analytic brain muscle. Is someone tells me a treatment that's outside of our field, and I'm like, okay, how can I describe this behavior analytically? And if I can't, maybe I ask more questions. And if I can, then I can move forward and feel good about this collaboration. Cool.
Let's take a quick.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, no, I know Dan is writing some notes. So we do not forget, I do want to take a quick pause here. Folks can get up, stretch a second, and then we'll come back and we'll talk a little bit about how to engage in some of these collaborative activities. We'll be right back. Yeah, it looks like it's not
Yeah, anything I do over here doesn't show up over there,
showing
I
up
guess.
over there without stopping and refreshing, which I could do that now if you
I
want
don't
to
think
finish.
we need to. I don't think we need to. It's just the code word.
Oh, there's some extra things I think
It's
Dan
not a
wrote.
big deal.
Okay,
I'm
if
just
we're good.
writing this down so I don't forget.
Okay. And we are back talking about the ethics of collaboration. But before we go on, I want to remind all of our listeners or potentially watchers today that ABA Inside Track is ACE and QABA approved. And by listening/watching this episode, you're able to earn one ethics credit. Whoopity doo, ethics. All you need to do is finish listening. We'll have a link, whether it's on YouTube, we'll have the link in your podcast player to go to our website where you can put in some key information as well as get any of the references and get the CE. You're going to need 2 secret code words, just like always. And the first of those code words is on a document that
I can tell you what it is.
Can you please? Because I
It's
forgot.
bundle.
Bundle.
BUNDLE. Bundle. Whenever I hear this word, I have an immediate reference. Rob, do you know what it is?
Oh, Mr. Bundle.
Yes, exactly. It's from Annie.
Oh, mine was a bundle of wood.
Oh, no, I always think of
That classic reference.
Miss
Bundle of
Hannigan.
wood.
Time for a tumble with the bundle.
I do not remember that.
I want to make an app or a program that gets people's stuff and puts it in like a bin, and you would pay me. And what's the name of my app? It's Bundle, but it's Bundl, no E, because that's how you name your apps. You take out.
Oh, I like that. You take off the E so then it's relevant.
Yeah, I'll take out the U too, so it's just Bundle.
Bundle.
We come to your house and we put a bunch of stuff in a box. We bundle it together. Anyway,
Okay.
Bundle.
Yeah.
All right. So when we last left off, we talked about the ethical requirements to collaborate. We've talked about how important it is to collaborate. We've hinted at some tips, but let's get into how does one actually meaningfully engage in collaborative behavior?
Yeah, I can also tell you there are a lot of advantages to engaging in collaboration. I'm going to tell you what those are.
Oh, yes.
And so I think one of the best ones is that you probably are going to save a lot of time, right? So if you are collaborating early with your other providers and you are thinking about your client and the outcomes that you all want to have, you're going to be promoting problem solving early on, and you're not going to be getting to a meeting after the client has already done badly. And then you're like, well, you did it. Well, you did it, right? So it is a super time saver if you can engage in those conversations with multiple service providers early, promote that problem solving, And then, you can go into the treatment phase and everybody really knows what's going on and they feel great about it, which will then provide hopefully an improved client outcome, right? Because you're having cohesive care. And this is from, we've talked about Danielle LaFranc's article, that's from 2019. And what they found is that if you're working with a transdisciplinary or multidisciplinary approach, everybody knows what's going on. So nobody's trying to like do things that are going to be counterintuitive or doing the same thing, but in different ways. So it makes it more confusing for the client. This really allows the client to perform at their optimal level if you're working together. Also, we're all going to work every single day, and we have to see the people that we work with every day, even if they're not behavior analysts. So if you are working really well as a team, you actually may feel better about going to work, right? You'll know that not everybody hates you, and when they see you at work, they're not going to be like, ugh, that's the behavior analyst, right? So it's really going to increase the relationship of the team and make your work life better because you don't feel like you are the odd man out or the one that nobody wants to talk to, right? It's also better. Another advantage is knowing that you are part of a team and owning that your collaborative efforts have made the client better, right? So knowing that you've worked together really helps and it makes everything better, right? It makes the client outcome better. It makes your life better at work. It makes problem solving better when everyone is collaborating. It also might help you as an individual, right? If you can have humility about others' viewpoints, if you can be listening, it's going to really promote understanding divergent viewpoints, which then may allow for greater problem solvings. And it's just an overall great way to decrease time because you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Yeah.
Thank you, Jackie. So if you are wondering how you might actually go about engaging in collaboration, I have some suggestions for you. The overall suggestion here is that you make yourself available to other people, and particularly you don't just come at them all the time with talking about how great you slash the field of behavior analysis is, right? This is more about establishing rapport with your coworkers and collaborators in the sense that, hey, we're all here, we're all in the human services or field together, and we're here to work with our clients who we really care about and promote their best self-interest. And hey, I'm a person and you're a person, and we probably have a lot in common, even though we went, slightly divergent paths in terms of our post-collegiate professional certifications, right? So there is a lot of overlap here and a lot of room with which we can establish that rapport. So first of all, listen to other people, have opportunities to talk with them, and when you talk with them, be humble and be open to hearing their perspectives. Have lunch. This is a suggestion that comes from the literature. And if if you're not watching this on YouTube, please just come here right now.
I don't want to look at this guy anymore.
Because I
You
absolutely,
come look at it, viewers. I don't want to see this guy.
you can't get where our faces are in the way, I think. So just
No,
make
you
sure
can see them. You can see them.
you
I can see them.
can. Oh,
Yeah.
good. Okay, because he looks kind of like he's like a sandwich vampire, maybe like he's about to like
Suck the
bite.
energy out of that
Yes.
He looks like a
vampire.
guy who was told, "You really want to eat that sandwich," and then hopefully the director said, "No, no, not that much."
I just love this picture so much. And I know I'm off track, but please look at this guy who's pretending to eat the sandwich with like aggressive eye contact with the camera. And is it even a real sandwich? I think it is actually. I
It
think it's like a
is.
Subway sandwich.
I I found this picture for you, Diana.
No, I found this picture.
Oh, I thought I found it.
No.
Could there be multiple pictures of this guy eating a sandwich? That
Well,
would
I
I
be
mean,
mean,
he's
I
a
have
free clip art. That's why
he
he's in
is.
here.
I have
Just
used him in
fantastic.
my classes
Okay.
before, so I guess both of us
Yeah.
I got to be
both of us
honest,
were
guys.
drawn to sandwich men.
He is not his performance as a guy wanting to eat a sandwich. It's I don't buy it. I don't believe he wants to eat that
That's
sandwich.
why it's a great picture. You're misunderstanding.
No,
Um,
I like
so
method acting with my sandwich eating pictures.
So if you were having lunch with this guy, you might have a lot of work to do. But generally speaking, have lunch with your colleagues and get to know them on a personal level, right? Like that's the whole point here. Sharing information about your field, your approach is great. Um, Thinking of opportunities to collaborate. So it doesn't always have to be led by a particular, challenging situation. Think about other things that you could do with, the school at large, or, it's SLP week and now it's OT week, and like let's do something together. Let's present to the kids about all the things that we specialize in, right? Like thinking of collaboration opportunities i- in less stressful situations can help promote rapport, celebrate your similarities, collaborate on research together. This is a great one. You could approach this in multitude of ways, right? So maybe it's something specific that you want to like work together to see if you can't figure out what the best evidence-based approach is, or maybe you want to send out a survey and collect data together. Who knows, right? LaFrance et al. Has some suggestions there. And then Critchfield suggests that we read articles outside of our field. Yes, we should do that. If we're, like one of you had already said, if we're only saying like we only will do things that are published in Java, then we are limiting ourselves, and we will be richer for examining how professionals outside of our field approach problems.
One thing that, in terms of putting a couple of these suggestions into one, because collaborating, there is always a time crunch around everything, and collaboration doesn't necessarily get more or less time than a lot of other tasks, is if you are looking to get more articles or get more information outside of a field, as you're learning about other professions, go to the people that you've enjoyed having lunch with or that have shared some information about their field. Or hey, maybe you just learned something interesting, like some of what Jackie was talking about in terms of how much SLPs are expected to learn in their grad programs and just how amazing it is that they can learn all those things. Bring that up with this professional that you have a nice, friendly relationship with. Them. I heard that this is an area of expertise for a lot of folks in your field. I would love, do you know any good research I can read? Because that's something I'd love to learn more about myself. It is a really
Yeah,
great way
great
to
idea.
demonstrate I value what you know. And
Yeah.
I'm not just here to steal information or to tell you how to do your job. I want your help to do my job better. And when you're building those relationships, it becomes very reciprocal very fast of like, oh, is this like a behavior? This seems like it's human behavior. So what do you know about? It really is a great way to build a dialogue in that you can really build collaborative projects where you're working together or you're sharing resources more fluently and regularly. Bare minimum, you at least learned a little something you didn't know about one of your colleagues.
Yeah, great suggestion. I also would add to this slide, don't, when you're having these conversations, like don't slide into jargon
Mhm.
as well. I didn't list that on the slide, but I think that that would be off-putting. What have I done? Okay, thank you. And then I want to make sure that we revisit the Brodhead 2015 decision tree that is in that article on how one might approach addressing a potential non-behavioral treatment that's sounds different than what we're used to. There are many touch point steps along the way where you might, if you're presented with a colleague who's suggesting a non-behavioral treatment, decide whether that treatment is in the ultimate best interest for the client and whether you can, work with them in that capacity, or in the worst case scenario that you're worried about the safety of this proposed treatment and you feel like you need to speak up. So that's what this decision tree is intended to walk you through. Again, like I said before, approaching this with humility and saying, this isn't something I've heard of before, but that doesn't mean it's bad. And this isn't something that is worded in the way that I would word it. But again, that doesn't mean it's bad. I just need to figure out what they're talking about so that I can, add in my own opinion as necessary. Maybe it's not even necessary for you to join in there. Okay. So so the decision tree that's in Brodhead, it starts out with what is the non-behavioral treatment that we're looking at? Is the client's safety at risk? If the client's safety is not at risk, then you have some additional steps to kind of figure out like, is this safe for them and important for me to weigh in on, or is this something that I don't actually need to put my 2 cents in? If you are worried about the client's safety, first and foremost, you might need to address it. And there are some things going on out there that aren't specific to a discipline, but that could get brought up that could be dangerous, right? So that would be a time where you'd intervene. If you're not familiar with the treatment enough to know if it's safe or not, that's your next step is to get some information about that. Reassess client safety. If you learn about a treatment and realize, oh, this is not something that's dissimilar to what we might do, it's just worded differently, right? Then think about if you can kind of like translate it into a way in which you understand it from your professional background. And if so, if you're no longer concerned about its safety, or efficacy, then you don't need to worry about that anymore. If you however, if you translate it and you think that it might interfere negatively with the goals that the team has set for the client, then maybe it is something that you want to address. So maybe if someone's recommending something that takes a ton of the time that's available to that client and you don't, based on your view of it or the evidence that's out there, you don't think that it is going to be beneficial in terms of them spending that much time on it, then maybe it's something you want to bring up to the group. The Brodhead recommends that you review or consult the CAPT, which is like a sub checklist within the decision tree. You can go check out the article on that. The CAPT is the checklist for analyzing proposed treatments. And the questions that you're asking yourself there are, is it a function-based treatment? Will it potentially increase skills? Will it promote pro-social outcomes? Or is there data attached to it so that we can determine if it's successful? Is there treatment integrity, social validity? How resource intensive is it? So all of these components are going to help you determine if this is maybe a good use of the client's time, right? And then if after all that you're like, gosh, I don't know, like it maybe it's not harmful, but I don't know if it's helpful. Then the last question to ask yourself is, are the impacts to the client sufficient to justify the possibility of compromising the professional relationship, right? So if you're like, this seems okay, but I don't know necessarily if it's going to be harmful, well, is it worth like blowing up the entire relationship and the client's IEP team, in order to put your foot down and say that we shouldn't address this or we shouldn't include this treatment, right? If you're really worried about it, then maybe it would come to those steps, but otherwise, maybe it's something where you just, oh, here's the checklist. Sorry, maybe it's something where you just let it go. There we go. I skipped ahead in my slides. So go back and check out Brodhead if you're want to know more about this. It's a nicely laid out article that, you know.
Do you want to go back to the capped? So if people are watching the video,
People can
take
take
a
a look at the
picture.
capped. Here it is. I did summarize it. This was the one where you're asking questions about the, you know, efficacy of the treatment. Does it have the pieces in place for us to be able to determine if it's efficacious? I believe is the right word there, right? So is data being collected? Are we looking at meaningful outcomes? Does it have treatment integrity? Is it a function-based treatment? Does it have social validity, etc.? So
It's
that's
sort of
all
like
in
a
the
weighted,
2015 Brodhead.
it's a weighted list you come up with to sort of plug into the decision tree.
Yep.
One of the challenges, I think, we're a huge fan of that article. We're a huge fan of that flow chart. I think one of the challenges, though, is if you are collaborating with others and this flow chart is your first step towards collaboration, you're coming at collaboration from a gatekeeping standpoint. And I think the article is awesome for folks who are getting used to the idea of how do I have tough conversations. But collaboration is more than just having tough conversations. As you know, we discussed a lot of other things that go into collaboration. So if you've done some of the groundwork of building meaningful relationships, really showing appreciation to colleagues, a lot of those initial steps will probably have already sort of worked their way into your own treatment planning repertoire with other staff members. Because for the first time you've ever heard of this treatment that someone's proposing is it, say, like a treatment planning meeting, you probably don't have time within that meeting unless you're like one of those people who's like, let me research something real fast and ignore the whole conversation we're having at this meeting. You're not going to be able to answer some of those questions quickly enough to have a meaningful conversation. So if you don't already know that some of those discussions are coming, you won't have done some of the legwork you need to do to ensure that you can have a meaningful collaborative conversation. So again, if you haven't done anything, you may need to reschedule a meeting, or you may need to say, I'd like to hold off. Could we have a conversation about this next time? Which nobody wants to do because they already had a meeting to talk about treatment and you haven't done your job. So again, using that flow chart, don't think you can just use that flow chart and that'll get you through all the problems. It is great for specific situations where you have to have or you may have to have a tough conversation, but you need to be prepped for it. And if you want to know what's a great way to have a tough conversation, you can also go back. I don't remember if this was in for later, Diana, but our episode on the book Crucial Conversations. I don't
Oh
want
no,
to
I could add it.
discount your treatment or the science that you bring to our conversation. I do want to be mindful of potential risks to the client, right? It's hard for anyone to get upset if that's how you phrase the conversation. You know, I don't want to do this, something that we all don't want to do. I do want to do this, again, something that we all want to do. So again, uh, I'm not going to go through, an entire redo of this. However, just to give an example, and this kind of gets us into dissemination station a little bit.
What's the next slide?
If I know it's the next slide, but if you were going to say have to have this tough conversation let's go back to the example of say weighted vests or weighted blankets, and right, what might that look like? Done. Do you mind going back to the last slide? Because I had some notes on that. Thank you. So again, what might that look like? Again, just saying, hey, weighted vest, no research, get out of town. That's crappy. We're not doing it here, is not going to get you very far in terms of a collaborative relationship or any sort of collaborative problem solving. And everyone else might say, we love weighted vests and we don't like you, so we're going to do it. We don't even care about your opinion. But if you're thinking about it from the perspective of having built a relationship, having valued the people that might make those recommendations, and having tools like the CAPT and Brodhead's decision-making tree, you can take that conversation of no, I don't want to use weighted vests in the treatment plan, and really turn into a meaningful conversation about evidence-based treatment and what's best and good practice without it becoming about anyone's lack of evidence or lack of science or lack of ethics, right? If you're working with people, you're familiar with the treatments that they use. You've been able to ask questions about them, and you've been able to have those really sometimes difficult either conversations or reflection processes on whether these are or are not behavior analytic treatments. Could you rephrase the use of a weighted vest? Maybe in some ways, there's some response effort for weighted vests if we're talking about maybe stereotypic behavior, but probably not. It's not a behavior analytic treatment. Is there any risk? Well, you've already been able to look into it with your OT colleague, and there's not really any risk for weighted vests. You might have been able to even look at social validity. The student loves using the weighted vest. This is something that happens a lot. Lots of kids are using these weighted vests at the school that you happen to be in, right? So there's not going to be any stigma about the use of it. Looking at something like the CAPT, you can answer questions about, is it a function-based treatment? No. But is it a socially appropriate treatment? Yeah, no one minds using it. Is it easy to use? Yeah, you throw on a vest every like 30 minutes. It's not very hard. Or if the student asks to use the vest, right? There's no challenge in using this. Is this treatment going to take away from other treatments? Probably not, because you can just wear a vest while you're doing other activities. So even though you come to the conclusion that it's not an evidence-based practice, if you have a relationship or you've been doing your collaborative groundwork, you've done all of this work to say, I don't need to stand up and tell everyone this is a dumb waste of time. However, I can have a meaningful conversation about the lack of evidence base that might lead us to say we probably want to proceed with caution, and we really do want to be collecting a lot of additional information as we implement this as a part of a treatment package, because I'm not totally sure that it's going to have the results that we're looking for. And that conversation is very different than there's no evidence base, we're not doing it. Because again, looking at data and having a relationship where you can have those conversations about treatment effectiveness, treatment data, maybe do a component analysis with an occupational therapist, you're going to determine pretty quickly whether this does or does not impact treatment in any way whatsoever. And if it does not, most people would then say, well, if they like the vest, I guess they can ask for it, but we're not going to prescribe it as part of the treatment plan anymore. So again, a great way to have a tough conversation in a way that everyone feels like they're being heard and is learning more about the science of, well, you're learning more about the science of occupational therapy potentially, and they're learning more about the science of human behavior and experimental methodology. So, some take home points beyond that example. It's important, regardless of your team, to have collaborative relationships with a number of other professionals within the field of human services. This is appropriate ethically, it's appropriate professionally as well. Collaboration has been shown to improve student outcomes. It improves parent social validity of treatment plans, and most likely will be something that you enjoy doing as you get into those steps and as you move outside of the minor discomfort that does come from being new to collaboration and working outside of your zone of competence, especially if you've just gotten out of your grad school, you've just taken your exams. Like we've talked about, there's a number of codes related to how collaboration is an ethical mandate. So if you're scared about collaboration and say, I don't know if it's for me, start from that conversation of, but I do value the ethics of my practice. Therefore, I have to sit in some of this discomfort I might have. But again, listen to shows like ours, listen to some of the references, read some of the references we've talked about. There's lots of resources out there to get more comfortable with what is your plan going to be. And again, because we know this is a skill, this is something that ideally we'd have more training about when we are just getting into the field. And for folks, I know we do have some students that listen to the show. If your supervisor has not worked with you on collaboration, ask them to show them some of this reference list that is going to be on our slide here, and say, can we practice some of these skills, or are there other people I can get a chance to work with and have these conversations in a safe environment so it's something I can do more fluently once I'm actually in practice on my own. And again, Bowman and Brodhead both have some really awesome frameworks for assessing and supporting these practices. So even if all you take away is, I'm going to try this flowchart out, great. That's a great first step. I think we talked about how it's not going to get you across the finish line of, I'm the world's best collaborator. Now I've created this interdisciplinary treatment team, but it will certainly move you along in your ability to start having more meaningful collaboration. At the very least, you won't be hurting your client or hurting other professionals' feelings, which is going to get you kicked off teams. All right. So, Diana, let's move to the last section of the show, pairings.
All right, it's time for pairings. And pairings, I tell you about other episodes you might want to go check out if you liked this one or want to learn more about this topic. So we've had several episodes where we focus on collaboration, and then more that I didn't list here for some unknown reason that I can also just let you know about.
The final slides, they didn't update as we were sharing them, but the final slides that we share will have some of the updated pairings on there.
Well, not on YouTube.
Not on YouTube, but there'll be a link to look at the slides if you'd like.
Oh, okay. So you could check out episode 171, where we talk about SLP collaboration with Dr. Erin Michaud, who is an SLP and a BCBA. You could listen to episode 188, where we talk about OT collaboration with Dr. Michael Roberts, who's an OT. You could listen to episode 255, where we talk about scope of comfort with Landria Seals Green, who is also a speech pathologist, or episode 259, where we talk about next level collaboration with Rose Griffin, who is a unicorn SLP BCBA. I also threw in there episode 148, dental exam tolerance with Dr. Kelly McConnell, because she talks a lot about collaboration with dental professionals in that episode. Episode 200, ethical problem solving with Dr. Matt Brodhead, as well as episode 26, where we review the flowchart I just referenced. That episode is called How to Talk to Non-Behavior Analysts Without Really Trying. And then Rob referenced the Crucial Conversations book club. That was episodes 216 and 217, which was part of our supervision series for that year. As part of pairings, I also like to recommend a snack that you can enjoy. And so the snack today is what I call the Olive Garden Special: soup, salad, and breadsticks. To reference back to my earlier slide, I've replaced the cake with the breadsticks to make it work. But bread is also chemistry and cooking and baking, excuse me. So that's pairings. Please enjoy.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for listening. Certainly, you can find our show everywhere. We appreciate it. If you're taking a look at the YouTube after maybe either listening to some of the audio podcasts, thanks for checking that out. Let us know how that went. It's something a little new for us. I don't think we're going to start doing it all the time, but sometimes, we have some extra resources that we'd love to share visually. You can certainly find us online as ABA Inside Track at all the socials on abainsidetrack.com to find links to all of the research that we discuss. We'll certainly highlight the articles that we mostly focused on. You can also go to our Patreon page, patreon.com/ABA Inside Track, to get access to all the episodes a week ahead of time, and at the 5 and up levels to get access to some free CEs and some polls on things like our book club choices and our listener choice episodes. We do those every season, but for book club, we're going to have a big book club voting smorgasbord at the beginning of the summer. So you're going to want to jump on that if you're interested in choosing our books for the 2025-2026 podcast year. I'm going to leave you with a references list, but we're also, this is one page of references. But I also want to remind everybody of our second secret code word. But Dinah, could you remind me what the second secret code word is?
It's newspaper. NEWSPAPER. These used to exist, everyone, and you would get the news delivered to your doorstep on this newsprint. It was all folded up together because that was the best way to get news out to people back in the day. Now you could use it to help potty train your dog, or you could wrap up your fish and chips in it.
So watching my crazy uncle's YouTube page and social media feed is not the best way to get news?
No one knows anymore.
Okay.
Newspaper.
Is that the end? Oh,
Yep,
okay.
that's
That
the
is the
end.
end. Sorry, I thought we had. I couldn't remember if we had a second reference to slide.
No.
Well, everybody, thanks so much for listening. If you watched, thanks for watching. We'll be back next week with another fun-filled episode. But until then, keep responding. Oh, wait. Actually, before we keep responding, other special thanks. I forgot.
Oh.
Thanks for Dr. Jim Carr for recording our intro, outro music, Carl Sturia for interstitial music, and Dan Thabit of the Podcast Doctors for his amazing editing work. Now we're going to wrap up the show. We'll be back next
But
week.
not
with
on
that
this video.
Fun-filled episode. Till then, yes, Dan only does the audio editing. Any video editing is my own mess. We'll see you next week. Till then, keep responding. Bye.
Bye.